back a year ago.
This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. We're very excited to be joined from the province of Alberta by Aaron and Alex Hogarth from Hogarth Malt. From home brewing up to the professional scale, the Hogarth family experienced the difference great malt makes. Every batch of Hogarth Malt holds a commitment to the land, people, and practices. These maltsters opt for traditional methods instead of cutting corners with automation and machinery. In doing so, they preserve the integrity of both their product and their local economy. So without further ado, we welcome Alex and Aaron to the Beer Bound Podcast. Hello to you both.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Welcome indeed. Maybe Alex, Aaron, you can both start off or take turns. Can you tell us a little bit about you, your family, and the enterprise?
So we started Hogarth Malt. It was an idea that came about, Aaron is a professional brewer at Ribstone Creek. We knew we wanted to do more than, work for someone else for the rest of our lives. And so starting a business was in the next venture. So we brainstormed, we thought about brewing, we kind of looked into that venture, but at the time there was a lot of breweries coming out and not a lot of differences for like the ingredients going into them. So we kind of saw malting as an opportunity to bring a little bit more to the Alberta brewing scene. We already have some great breweries in the province, and there was even more coming on, so malting seemed like a great way to kind of supplement that craft brewing industry.
Yeah. And mostly I'd say, I guess what kind of got us going on that track was the number of farmers from the area that would come into the brewery asking us, hey, I grow malt barley. How about you guys make a beer with this or something along those lines, right? And that's kind of just what got the wheels turning here, that there wasn't that middle ground, I guess, back then, and just kind of change up the industry a little bit, make it easier for small farmers to get into small beer.
Yeah, just kind of bring that connection between the farmer and the brewer, and come at it from a brewing angle. That gives us kind of I feel like we kind of have an optimal insider into what the industry is looking for when you come at it from a brewing side. So
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. Can you give us a bit of a better sense of the entire enterprise that you have? How the scale? Tell us exactly how big or
in the scale of malt houses, we're very, very, very small. So our malt system here is designed around a 1-ton batch finished. So basically we're filling equipment here with 1-ton sacks of grain, big grain totes, right? And the roaster is even smaller. We can go down to about 60 kilos on that side of things, which just kind of gives us a little bit more flexibility for just making all kinds of interesting products and kind of playing around with the malt, right?
Yeah.
But
The smaller batches, it's a lot more work, but it's a lot less risky too. If a brewer comes to us and says, hey, you want to try this grain? Or we have this farmer who wants to do just a small batch for one beer, we can say, yeah, we can do it, because we don't have to do 10 tons of it. And it gives us that little bit of like small batch, but yeah, it's nice it's a good size, especially serving craft breweries that are also typically smaller. So I think we're the 1/300th of the size of a batch at raw malting.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very small. Yeah.
Sounds like it plays to your strengths though, right? You're able to be nimble and adapt. And so you said that, you have farmers that come to you as well as, it sounds like brewmasters, and almost like you're playing matchmaker in a sense. Like, okay, we got a farmer with a grain, and we also have a brewer that wants this. So you guys just kind of like put them and mix them all together and come up with the perfect products. So I don't know, maybe tell us the science behind that. But like, is it just general requests? Do you get everyone in a room? How does that really work?
So far, it's been kind of fun. So what we call it in the industry is toll malt. And basically, we're just the middleman putting the two together, right? And so far, it's actually been a lot of fun, because quite often we'll sit down with the brewers and the farmers at the same table, and we can discuss everything. What kind of beer are we looking for? How was the grain grown? Where was it grown? Kind of thing. Then it kind of gets put on us that we have to test things, make sure things are going to work out right, because now the brewer is depending on us to come up with this product, and it has the quality we're looking for, the malt characteristics, and that in the end it's going to provide the beer that they're looking for, right? So it can be fairly complex. There's more to it than I initially kind of thought back when I was still a commercial brewer, right? But it's been fun. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. And then the cool part is once the malt's ready, then we also have the opportunity to typically go and brew with that brewer. So see it from and the farmer can come, it really does bring it full circle back, right? So it's truly that farm to glass kind of transition, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, and get the same group back around the same table with the pint that everyone basically put in for. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Aaron, Alex, how complex is the malting process in its basic form, and how complex can it get? Can you give us a little bit of a sense of the basic crash course of how one even malts barley or wheat or a type of grain?
Yeah. Well, definitely all the different grains react differently. Even crop year to crop year. Last year, of course, out here we had a pretty dry year. So the malt barley just wasn't where we kind of would have liked it to be. And it's amazing how, given that living product, how it reacts different no matter what, pretty much. Even throughout the year, you take the same crop, and right when it comes off the field, it's one thing. And by the end of the year, when the new harvest is coming off, it can be completely different as well, right? So a lot of the work here tends to center around the lab work, which is where we're set up right now. And we'll be testing things like the germination of the grain and just how active it is. We'll do test steeps on the grain, which is where we're just mixing water with the grain and seeing how well it takes up moisture and stuff like that. And it is our goal. Actually, I have most of the equipment here. We just haven't had time to put it together yet, but I would like to put together our little pilot malt house that we would do about 25 kilo batches with. And then it just gives us more kind of ability to test to see how those grains behave on the floor, how well they take up that steep water, like I was saying. And so from start to finish, that's basically what we're doing. We have just a few main areas to malting, right? A lot of it starts in the lab, like I just said. but then we'll go into steeping and how important that is in the grain. The steep out moisture can have probably more of an impact on the grain than even the kind of germination time matters quite a bit too, but just even how it reacts on the floor. A couple percent moisture in that grain can make a huge difference between, our perfectly well modified malt and something that maybe has a touch too much beta glucan, or the proteins haven't quite broken down like we're expecting and things like that, right? So steep is super, super important. It'll spend 2 days in our steep tank, typically going air rest, water rest, and we'll be draining that. And then after those 2 days, we basically just have a big wheelbarrow that we dump it out of that tank, and we just layer it on the floor. And even the malting process on the floor, it's been interesting because we've been learning through trial and error here that definitely when it first hits the floor, it's just not as active, right? So it doesn't build up heat like you would kind of think. It's just starting to chit, so the rootlet is just starting to emerge. And so what we typically do is when it goes on the floor right out of the steep tank, it'll be quite deep. We'll put the piece maybe upwards of 12 to 16 inches deep and let it build up some of that heat and build up some of that energy. And then as germination is going on, we're thinning it out, we're spreading it out further and trying to keep that temperature under control, because by the end of germination, that grain can easily hit, 30, 40 degrees if it were just piled too deep or something, right?
Yeah.
Which would lead to horrible malt. And so just the whole process all the way through is just about control and kind of having that feel, and we can, kind of put our hands in the malt, and we're testing it every day in the lab and just seeing where things are at. And then the final day, which is kind of one of the best parts of it, is when it finally does go in the kiln, that you're at a point that everything's done, and we'll dry that grain down from about 44% moisture all the way down to right around 4.5%, somewhere in there, under 5 typically, right? And once it's kind of locked in,
right? Sorry, just to follow the process, but that's from the floor, like when it's spread out. Is that correct? Okay.
So we will load the floor, and that's all manual as well. So we're shoveling it off the floor, loading it in our grain totes here, and putting it in that kiln for drying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think probably got most of it there. Anyways, I'm sure I'm missing something, but
well, and the kiln plays a big role in the finished product too. So the different kilning profiles that we can do on it is right out of the kiln, we can come out with a whole bunch of different products, from lightly kilned, highly kilned.
Yeah, not to mention so part of the versatility and the flexibility that we've designed into our malt house is that we have the ability to do different things like stewing, crystallization, the roaster, definitely after it's out of the kiln, we can do lots there as well. So it gives us just a wide variety to make just about anything a brewer could want, right? Yeah,
it's good. So the kiln, I guess, just dries it out completely.
Yeah.
I guess regardless of the beer style, you're sort of finishing, and then you're saying, maybe Alex, you were saying, and then it could go into a roasting. I'm assuming another. I don't know what to call the vessel, perhaps that roasts it.
Just a big roaster.
Oh, okay, right. And I'm assuming that's sort of where you get as dark as you need to be, depending on the profile you're going for. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, even out of the kiln, we can go. So our base products, like our base malts, because we're craft, we are going to be more expensive than raw. Obviously, we didn't come into the market thinking we're going to take on the Walmart of malting. So raw can do their thing. They do it great. They do it fantastic. There's like love for malt or raw and Canada malting for what they do. Where we wanted to be different was we wanted to come into the market and give different value for base malts, because obviously base malts are going to be the biggest percentage of product that craft brewers are using. So while we could just be perfectly happy selling specialty malts, we know we're going to move more product having that base malt as well. So what we wanted to do with our base malts is kind of be a little bit more European. And so those are a little bit higher color content. Our Pilsner's Undermodified. So those are the differences in our malting process that we do to differentiate ourselves from those raw and Canada malt standard 2-row base malts. And the color that we put on our pale is actually done right in the kiln. So we can get a certain amount of color and flavor out of our kilning process. And there's only certain products that go into the roaster that they need that extra high heat to get that different, that extra more nutty, roasty, coffee, chocolate flavors and colors. So yeah, a lot of the products actually come out of the kiln in a 1-ton batch, perfectly ready to go. And then from there, we can also take those base and put them in the roaster to even create more. So yeah.
Okay. I'm curious, so you mentioned something called Undermodified. So that's something I'm not super familiar with. Maybe you could touch on that.
Yeah. So it's not really undermodified. It's just slightly undermodified. What it does, at least for me and the brewing background I have, is that just with the different protein left in the grain, there'll be a slightly higher beta glucan content, things like that. It makes it a little bit more difficult on the brewer because they do have to go a little bit above and beyond to use a malt like this. We do recommend like a protein rest, things like that. But it also gives the brewer more creativity to play with those steps in the mash. Possibly even doing decoctions and things like that. And then, so that undermodified thing, we believe just lends more to the body of the beer, the head retention. There could even be, depending on the mash, there could be different kind of starches and dextrins left in the malt that just leave it more up to the brewer to decide what they want out of it, right? So, yeah.
Cool. I guess a little variety, and depending on what the brewer is going for, I suppose.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
Alex, Aaron, who are your main clients? Are they mostly in Alberta, or do they expand outside of the province a little bit? Who do you actually sell to?
They are 100% in Alberta because
So far.
So yeah, we only started malting in August last year. So obviously we built a malt house in COVID years, which was fun. Let's put it that way.
That's a good word to use.
So it took a little longer to get going. Just due to like product supply chains and things like that. So we only started malting in September, and we've kind of taken it fairly slow as we went along. We didn't want to, jump the gun and have 30 tons worth of grain sitting ready to kind of go. We would rather kind of make fresh as demand demands, I guess. And so all of our customers are in Alberta right now. We haven't really sought to go outside, but there's definitely some organic. Oh, that's the other thing. So far we're all organic grains. So there's definitely some key organic brewers in Canada that we'd kind of like to see in our product in. But for now, yeah, we're kind of just looking at the local breweries and seeing where we can fit in to their, one-offs and get them kind of using our grains and seeing how Hogarth Malt can help complement their products and where we fit into their production schedule. So so far we've had a handful of commercial breweries use us. We've had great support from the home brewers. They have been fantastic across the province. And we really appreciate home brewers for their instant support. As we know, most professional brewers come from home brewing. So it's kind of cool to see, and they're craft breweries' biggest supporters too, right? So it's great for us to get that word out from the home brewers, and we love supporting them and their crazy beers they come up with. We had our first Hogarth Malt that we made in this facility. We had a big homebrew day in September. I think we scrambled to get all the malts ready for that day.
It was crazy.
And But we had a huge turnout and it was so fun. They all came out, they all brewed beer, they brought their systems, they brewed beer. We had a big lunch and they all brought their home brews to try. And yeah, it was super fun that way. And we hope to just keep growing with home brewer support, professional brewers, like commercial brewers, and just get more Hogarth malt into more beers. And
So when you say commercial breweries, that you mean like craft breweries, like brick and mortar locations, right? And then home brewers as well. Is that, I think maybe it's just me, but I guess I neglect that's a huge market, isn't it? You're not just only looking for the institutions, the craft breweries, but there's also just probably in Alberta, like all across the country, an enormous amount of home brewing going on, and they obviously need their malt. So would you say, like, would you have a grasp on how many home brewers you sell to?
It's probably
we've done a lot of we've done a couple like bulk buys through homebrew clubs, and I think the Calgary Yeast Wranglers, we actually haven't done a bulk buy with them yet, but a lot of our members have been kind of like reaching out individually. But I think actually the Calgary Yeast Wranglers is the biggest homebrew club in, maybe not. They definitely host the biggest homebrew competition every year. Yeah. So we just sponsored that with a few bags of malt, and it was crazy the amount of beers that they have, like, and some talented good brewers. I don't know the amount.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably been at least 34 home brewers that
for sure
supported us so far. So
for 6 months in, we're pretty happy with where we've been at, and I think we've had a lot of brewers, like professional brewers, craft breweries, reach out lately, because I think the supply chain issues that we're seeing from the UK to North America are really starting to become more apparent. And that's really where we know that craft malt houses can be a huge way to like support local. And that's hopefully where we can offer breweries a little bit more fresh malt, local malt, and hopefully for even cheaper than what they're spending right now bringing in UK. So, yeah,
cut out some of that supply chain process, right? If you're out back, if you're in the backyard, that's a little bit easier, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good, and then hopefully have maybe a customer for a little bit longer, right? And obviously let your work shine through. That's pretty good. Exactly. So, have you seen it? Like, is it maybe not necessarily with just importing from the UK or whatnot, but have you seen that there is maybe a bit more, let's say over the last couple of years, because that's when we've really seen those supply chain issues, maybe with your connection to the home brewing community and other local craft brewers, have you seen that there is an overall shift towards using local products in beer, or would you say it's maybe just a sort of this element of circumstance?
No, I would say that there's definitely a demand for as much of production going to local product. And honestly, that's where I think like our biggest strength lies is that we can't compete with the Rars and Canada Maltings of the world, but we can definitely compete with a lot of the import specialty malts and things like that. And that's what we're seeing even with other maltsters in the province. That's probably the largest area of growth, right? And we hear it from brewers all the time that basically they're just waiting on one or two types of malt being produced in order for everything being Alberta grown, right? And that is really cool. Like, basically, if we could say a huge portion of craft beer in the province is all coming off of fields around us, then that's where we want things to go. Yeah,
for sure. Is there like one style of malt that's like most in demand from maybe some of those new
there's one that still isn't produced. We've been saying that we're going to produce it for the longest time, but it's a little difficult, which is crystal malt. And so that's one malt that we don't have in the province yet. And we have made some small batches of it, but it's just been like, made a mess of our roaster, and or the products haven't quite turned out where we want them to. So that'd probably be the biggest one. But
that one I think would be, once we get that dialed in, I think there'll be a lot of brewers knocking on the door for some Alberta grown crystal malt. It's yeah, there's some brewers that love it, and it's kind of one of those like,
Yeah.
you either love it or you hate crystal malt, and the ones who love it, they want it. So yeah, we're hoping to get that kind of nailed in fairly soon with producing big batches of it. Let's say the small ones we can make, but they would not be cost effective.
No, we'd have to be charging $200-300 a bag or something.
So I've heard crystal malt a couple times talking to local craft brewers, and what goes into what and different beer styles and things of that nature. So what makes it, it sounds like it's a little more labor intensive or perhaps more costly. Obviously, there's a little more that goes into making crystal malt. Maybe you could talk to that process, since if it is requested. Like, how do you take your normal? Let's say if you had to take a comparison that some of the malts that you normally produce compared to the crystal malt, what's the biggest difference there?
So the difficulty for us with crystal malt is, like, our roaster is completely capable of doing it, which all crystal malt is it's basically almost a beer that's been brewed within the grain, right? We keep the grain wet and we recirculate the moisture back through either the roaster or the kiln, so that it stews within itself, and you take it up to that 60-degree range and let those starches convert down into sugar, and you get this little sugar pocket inside of that grain that eventually we can just dry it down and we can keep that in there. And then from there we can roast that grain after it's dried and get basically all the different colors of crystal malt that somebody might be looking for. The problem that we've been running into is our roaster. Actually, we've done some fantastic crystal malt batches on our roaster, but between all of the rests, the heat up time, drying it down, it's like a good 6-7 hour roast. And the thing is we will load 100 kilos into the roaster wet, right? But it's at close to 50% moisture. And by the time it's dried down to 3-4% moisture, we've already lost half our weight in malt just in the water losses, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, for 6 hours to get like 2 bags of malt just doesn't quite work out, right? So we are working on some other ways of getting that, but we've been kind of playing with all different kinds of malt, and crystal just happens to be one of the difficult ones.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's good insight, right? I've heard it a few times, and we like to research certain things obviously regarding craft beer, and we've heard of different kinds of malt and single row and single row and 2 row and things like that, but never got really into the crystals. So it's interesting. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So you can't find crystal malt anywhere in the province, is that right?
No one's making it in Alberta.
I don't think in Canada.
Really?
No, I don't believe anybody's making it in Canada, as far as I know. And the only 2 places North America wise that would be making it is Great Western in Vancouver, Washington, and Breese. They're somewhere out east there. I'm not exactly sure where all their plants are located, but craft malt wise, I don't think, as far as I know, there could be somebody out there making it, but I don't know of anybody.
Aaron or Alex, you mentioned that there was supply chain issues, particularly with the UK. Could you talk a bit about that? What are the supply chains typically internationally in terms of malt? Where is it coming from? What are the main sources of malt that a typical Canadian craft brewer would try to get their hands on? Is it not, a lot of it isn't domestic? Is that fair to say? It's coming from overseas?
I guess.
Like North America, I think we make the most malt in the world.
We make
Pretty
a good
close.
portion of it, right? Most of the base malt that we'd be using, even the big guys, from the small all the way up to the big, is North American malt, which would be mostly kind of grown in that Alberta, Saskatchewan, part of Manitoba, and kind of that northern part of the US as well. And so the bulk of the kind of the alcohol portion of the beer, that's where it's coming from. The specialty malts, on the other hand, are definitely more so coming from UK, Germany, places like that. So what we've seen is just, with shipping containers having issues and things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of these brewers are finding it hard to source those malts.
And I even think like North America, because of the last year's barley crop, I think there was a huge, we're not farmers, obviously. So we don't keep up a whole thing because we don't use a ton of grain. We don't really keep up a whole lot on the like percentage difference of crops grown this year to last, but there definitely was a huge impact this last year. So I think there was a lot of small breweries worried they might not get even their base malts from like Canada Malts and the Raws of the world, just because those huge contracts like Molson and Labatt's are going to take priority over the small guys, right? When you're buying thousands and thousands of tons of malt, Canada Malt's going to prioritize that brewery over your tiny one that buys 40 tons a year or 50, whatever it is. So I think there was a lot of breweries just kind of like hedging their like bets with like reaching out to these small craft maltsters, and just seeing what else there was available. Obviously, like it does come down to the bottom line for a brewery, and we know that Aaron ran a brewery for many years, knowing that profits are not huge in a craft brewery. So we totally understand that there's definitely breweries that can't afford that cost increase for a craft malt product. There's definitely some breweries that can. So that's where we kind of want to be the guys who can give you the local malt and, still fit within that, baseline cost for them. So, yeah.
The grains that you use, are you particular on where those come from? I think you touched on this a little bit, but is that mostly, I know like you're in the best place in the country in terms of local supply, but do you ever branch out like I to get any stuff from the US or maybe even overseas? I don't know.
Honestly, I don't think we'd probably ever have to. But if somebody did want to make some toll malt, as we said, right? If a brewer from BC specifically wanted the farmer down the road to grow some barley for them, we'd have no issue malting BC barley or Manitoban barley or something like that and sending it back out their way. So yeah, we're definitely not against it. For our local market, we're definitely more interested in using that locally grown barley or other grains, right? And it's kind of cool that we can support like our farmer here, small organic farmer. He's only about 10 minutes away, right? And the fact that we can support him and take probably most of what he's growing is pretty cool.
Yeah, part of like our organic is, well, it's something that we believe in, something we really try to like support organic, and definitely like not being farmers, we didn't have something we needed to value add to. So all these farmers around us, we literally sit surrounded by crops. So in 1 year, I think probably 2/4, 3/4 sections would give us more malt than we would ever need for the year. So we went the hard route and we chose the tiny farmers who farm organically with the old equipment and are just doing it differently to give them another value added chain for their products and to tell that story. And actually this last week, the one farmer that we kind of did the toll malt for between him and us and another brewery, they actually got the first regenerative agriculture certification in Alberta. So, which is really cool. So yeah, so there's organic agriculture, then there's regenerative agriculture. So regenerative is like just going a little bit further than organic. You don't use because a lot of people think, well, organic, you're just using different pesticides and fertilizers. Regenerative is more how you farm, is how those nutrients get back into the soil. So they're thinking more about what are they going to plant for a cover crop that they're going to then till into the soil to put those nutrients back in versus like injecting or spraying on those nutrients for those crops. So yeah, it was kind of cool that they were the first regenerative certification in Alberta, and we hope that like little ventures like ours can support more farmers kind of thinking outside the box, because it is hard to be a small farmer in Alberta. You are either you're either big and you can afford to keep buying land and, you know, buying the new combines and things like that, or you're a small farmer that is looking to sell to that big guy. So for us, it was really important to support small farmers that are doing things differently.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds good. And like, I'm happy you mentioned that regenerative farming. That's pretty interesting. We were speaking from, it was Matt from Maker's Malt a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that same process, which is, we don't obviously, we're craft beer experience operators, so we don't know too much about it, but this is, you know, it's really good to get the insight directly from, you know, those who are in the industry are connecting. You know, obviously you guys are maltsters and you're connected with the farmers who are trying to do this and be very sustainable, which is great. And we're definitely all for that. And like you said, you know, you're sort of the guys supporting craft farmers, supporting craft maltsters, supporting craft brewers. So, you know, it's local and, you know, and tight knit all around. That's great. I love hearing that. We're obviously big supporters of craft beer. So it's nice to see that it goes a little further down the line, all the way through the ingredients.
I heard that, I don't know if this is true, like the situation in Ukraine, like Ukraine being the breadbasket of Europe, as well as being a massive exporter to parts of Africa and Asia. Like I've heard that's gonna, like I know you're not in the agricultural space, but that's gonna shift up the whole market a little bit just in terms of prices, which will affect potentially international beer markets. I don't know if that has come across your desk at all.
Honestly, I don't know at this point, you know, how it's going to affect everything coming up. Definitely that we're a global, you know, the commodities markets are a global thing. And people are going to be buying grain or other commodities anywhere they can get them. It probably will drive prices up, and it will change. How brewers have access to things, who has access to food. You know, it is a bit of a scary thing, like just seeing where things are headed, but we're hopeful. Like you know, one of the things that I think kind of helps us out is that we are just super local, right? Where at least some of those global issues don't quite affect at least our business directly. In that, you know, we're dealing with these farmers directly in very small quantities. But even then, this past year with drought and everything else, we've noticed prices going up. And I mean, eventually it's going to kind of trickle down to everybody, including just the regular beer drinker, right? And
well, all those all the UK maltsters, I think we'll probably see their, I would anticipate we'll see their shipping across the oceans will be limited, right? Because if they aren't getting the grains they need to supply their brewers, they're going to be sending them overseas, right? If we had a supply shortage here in Canada of malt, we wouldn't be shipping it to China. Well, maybe they would. They probably would.
Go where the dollars are, right?
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day,
so, whoever pays the most is going to get that malt. But I think it's definitely going to have an impact. It's not, no matter what, it's not going to be good for anyone anywhere for food or beer. So
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about regulation? Like how easy was it for you to just open shop last year? Is the province, I mean, you're in a bit more of an open province in terms of business, or at least the reputation of your province would suggest that that's what you are. Is it easy to just open shop?
Hopefully this doesn't hopefully we don't get any red flags and all of a sudden we have inspectors knocking on our door.
But we can move on. We can ask.
I set the question.
Next question. Yeah, no.
Jason Kenny, you're not listening, are you?
No, malt is not considered a food product. It is not considered alcohol because it hasn't been made into alcohol yet. So really it came down to our municipality approving our business and a bank giving us money. And that was pretty much it. So as far as like food inspection, we would like to think that if a food inspector came in here, they'd be really impressed with how we maintain the facility. So we have very high, I think that comes from Aaron's, I think
brewing side of things.
Brewing background is that,
of course,
you know, everything needs to be clean, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with dirty grain, right? So even like we could sanitize the floors before, but you're still putting dirty grain on them. So we still clean the floors, but do we use a caustic like you would in the brewing industry? No. Like we're making sure they're clean, and but yeah, it's not like beer where if you took clean beer and put it in a dirty tank, you're going to have a problem. We're taking dirty grain and putting it on a floor. So it's almost like the opposite, right? Like,
and then
so yeah.
As for like, interprovincial kind of things, it's kind of nice because not being alcohol, it's wide open there, right? So we can send malt anywhere in North America, no issues. And we don't have those barriers like some other industry. So,
For sure.
Yeah,
that's good. That's interesting. I like that you asked that question, Andy, because it's the ingredient prior to becoming alcohol, right? So I guess that's good, and that gives you leeway. Ideally, as a small business, you can then expand a little bit, and you won't have any of those barriers. And lack of barriers is always good for business. So
exactly.
That's great. Well, you mentioned Aaron, you were in the commercial brewing industry previously. So do you still brew today?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a little pilot system here that I built, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, based off of the electric brewery, if anybody's ever seen that. And so we have a tap system out front where we're doing smash beers, we're brewing NEPAs and all kinds of different things. And definitely testing our malt as much as we can before it's even going out to anybody. And it's kind of fun. It's definitely part of me. I love brewing. It's probably the best industry I've ever been a part of. And it's just so inclusive and everybody's so welcoming, and it's just a lot of fun. That it's kind of cool that we can be part of it in a different way now. And there's always a little part of me that kind of misses, being in a brewery every day, making big batches of beer. But every now and then, cranking out one of these little 50-liter batches and getting some friends over and enjoying the finished product's always good. Yeah,
absolutely. Has there ever been a malt that you produced then used in your own one of your own batches that it's been like, oh, it's eureka moment, like this needs to be brewed for this beer? Has there anything been like so perfectly made for a beer that it just kind of came like this has to be done? Had you ever had anything like that?
Definitely a lot of the product development that we're doing in the malt house here is that brewing background, right? I've used so many different kinds of malts throughout the year that I just get excited, like coming in here and it's like, what else can we play with? What else can we do, right? So we have been playing around a lot. We've made like dextrin malts, honey malts. We're working on melanoidin. We just finished a batch of rye malt. So it is pretty exciting and getting to play with those.
I think all of them are exciting, right? Like,
really.
Yeah.
It's just
it's awesome when it like turns out and you have friends over and they're just like, this is awesome, like why aren't you brewing anymore? Like, so and then to have like 100% our malt in that is like even better, right? So like I already knew he was a good brewer, so now just having our malt in there, it just showcases both the business and like his brewing abilities. So
and then it's exciting to hear back from brewers that talk about specific beers that they've used our malts and stuff, and all the great flavors that they're getting and all these different things, right? And it's just
I think our when we had the roaster commissioned, we had our kids like loved the guy who came out from Minneapolis. He came from Minneapolis and he came and helped us roast and get the roaster set up. And so him and our 8-year-old made a recipe that our 8-year-old named a coffee malt. And it's actually like, only homebrewers have used it because we haven't really like figured out how to describe it very well. But
it'd be similar to like a brown malt, just a little touch darker. And the feedback we've had from the homebrewers on it is awesome, right? The flavor. The coffee notes are incredible, right? So
yeah, he gets 9-year-old now. He gets props for coming up with maybe the most popular roast we have so far. So, and unique. It's more unique, right? Where most of our other roasts are kind of like, if you use a pale chocolate, this is our roast. If you use a chocolate, here's a chocolate, right? Yeah. So that one, and we hope that we can come up with different ones, and creating local, not even dupes, but just local versions of the most popular malts that are being used in the province. So
that's awesome. Cool. Hey, well, I know you guys are family business from what I've read on the website. So like, if you got your 9-year-old helping you make malt recipes, like you can't get much more family than that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is Hogarth Malt, are you guys a bit of an anomaly, or like, are you starting to see in Alberta a lot of independent craft maltsters popping up? Is that sort of a trend that's really on the rise?
Yeah, it's definitely coming. We're actually probably the fourth. I think we're maybe the 4th malt house open in the province.
Craft malt house.
Yeah, craft malt house. And it's definitely coming, but I think there's room for many of us, and it's kind of that whole rising tide floats all boats kind of thing, right? And I think it's awesome to just see that market growing and more craft breweries interested in all these different products. And so
I think in like I was kind of saying, how it's really hard for farms to grow in Alberta because of land costs and everything. I think we're seeing a lot of farmers trying to like find value added like options for their farms. So that's a lot of the craft malt houses, and actually most across Canada, I would say, are all farmers growing their own grains and just finding another value added source for them. And so I think we'll see more of that popping up. I don't know if there's anybody else as crazy as us to go in it without a farm, but
it'd be kind of nice to have a farm as a backing kind of thing for the business, right? But I think that's why it's important for us that we've wanted to kind of carve out our own little niche, right? And that's where the organic floor malting, kind of flexible malt house kind of comes in, right? That we can kind of be our own little part of the market and welcome anybody else that joins us.
Spread the love, spread the malting love. That's
exactly.
Same as it is in the craft beer industry, I'm sure you know, right? And craft beers are usually pretty keen to not burn bridges and stay connected. So that's great.
For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you know how easy or difficult, I know you said all of your clientele, they're all in the province, but do you know how easy or difficult it would be to export your product internationally? Like even if you wanted to go south of the border, would that be something that would be quite strenuous, or would that be?
We actually had somebody reach out from the States recently, and so we're just looking into that and how it'll work. But honestly, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I don't think it is that hard. I think it's like I said, it's not a regulated product. It's not a live grain. I know crossing seed across the borders can be kind of difficult sometimes, but because it's not a seed anymore, it's actually dead. It would never grow. I don't think it's much more difficult than getting shipping and probably a customs. So, but I haven't looked into it yet, so I cannot. That's not a hill I'm going to die on saying it's easy.
I might find out otherwise.
There's probably 1 or 2 pieces of paperwork that need to be filed and, cross your T's, dot your I's, etc. But
but you're right. Like it's not an alcoholic product. Obviously it's not a grain, like it's a packaged product. Like you would think that would be not too difficult.
No.
Yeah. So fingers crossed, because there's being all organic, I think there's a very, very, very small niche market of breweries that are actually interested in that. As far as breweries in Alberta, we kind of already knew that going in, that there wouldn't be that many that really cared that we're organic or not. So it's not something we haven't based our prices on it being organic. It's kind of just one of those like, there's a freebie added value to your product if you care to share that it's organic malt.
Yeah, I'm surprised actually that you say that craft breweries in Alberta wouldn't care about that label. I would think
Well,
that they would.
there'd be a few, definitely. I think it's definitely growing, but I would say we're probably a little ahead of the curve, especially in Alberta.
Yeah.
But you know, as like the sustainability thing is becoming more important to a lot of these brewers, I think it's only going to grow. At least that's kind of what we're basing our business on, right? So,
No, and that I think like those breweries that care, it's whether they care. Like I said, whether we are doing organic or not organic, our prices would be pretty close to the same. So I think it's more that breweries wouldn't pay more for organic malt if they had the choice, right? Because I think there's also issues with getting organic hops and then organic yeast, and then organic certification is not easy to get. So at the end of the day, it's kind of just an extra story they can tell about the malt or the brew, is that it's got organic malt in it, which some of their customers are going to care about, some aren't. So they really have to add, like we said, breweries have tight margins, so they have to kind of weigh those, like, if it costs $10 more a bag, is that worth it to them? So, but yeah, like Aaron said, I think it'll be a growing market, and yeah, if we can kind of get more people interested in it, and yeah, like we said, we did it for more than just one single reason. And yeah, it just kind of fits who we are and how our values of our business are. So it's like I said, it's a freebie extra that you get when you buy Hogarth Malt. You get to say it's organic malt. Yeah.
Well, it goes a long way, like Andy was saying, like maybe to your point, it's tough to get like all the ingredients of beer to be, certified organic or something to that effect. But a lot of that goes a long way, or for instance, we've seen craft breweries using putting on their cans like all ingredients are made in Ontario, or maybe they want to go the route that everything made in the or used in the brewing process is organic. So yeah, I can definitely see that. It's to your point, Alex, you said it's a freebie ad. I think it's a wonderful freebie ad. So yeah, I think there'll be a push for it.
Is the production seasonal at all, or are you able to produce malt all year round, or is there sort of a hot season and a cold season? No,
it definitely, and definitely where malting came from, it was definitely a seasonal thing, right? Where now with our equipment, we're not quite so limited in the seasons and things like that. The way we've designed our malt house, like our germ room stays about 13 degrees at like 80% humidity just all the time, right? Whether it's summer or winter, it's a little bit easier on the system in certain seasons, like definitely spring and fall. We're not relying on air conditioners and humidifying and all these other things quite as much. But basically with technology the way it is now, we can malt year round and have no issues there.
Like I said, no lack of the raw ingredient coming for you guys all around where you are.
No. When we only
need the winter.
yeah. We don't need very much right now, so we can. We're still malting 2020 barley, so we still have good barley, like the ideal year of barley that we're malting right now. So which is beautiful.
It was really nice barley a couple of years ago. So that's what we're still using. Everything was a little bit higher protein last year, so we're happy to still be using the year before.
I don't think we asked you this. Do you work with distilleries at all, or only breweries?
So far, we haven't worked with distilleries. We're definitely open to things, actually considering that even there's one or two organic ones in the province as well. And some of the products that we're looking at providing would be, distiller malts, right? Things like rye and wheat. So we're definitely open to it, but we just so far have not just
been focusing on breweries right now, and then we'll kind of
it's a bigger market.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you bullish as well on the growth? I mean, you mentioned the growth of craft maltsters in the province, but like, are you also optimistic in terms of the influx and the growth of craft breweries in Alberta as well as the country? I mean, kind of gone through a weird, rocky 2-year period that I know you're familiar with, but like prior to that, the growth of craft breweries across the country was exponential. Do you think that growth is going to continue? I suspect you would hope it would continue, but do you see a pattern that you're kind of following in terms of Alberta brewery growth?
Yeah, I definitely see the growth of craft beer big time. Like if anything, COVID was definitely hard on all industries, especially restaurant and things like that, which definitely put some pressure on a lot of these breweries in the province. But I think maybe one possibly good thing to come out of the whole thing is that people are maybe a little bit more aware of where things come from maybe now. And so they are looking to support local and just really kind of honing in on those specific products and things like that. So I'm hopeful in the next few years, now that things are opened up and everything, that people start supporting a lot of these small business and in turn supporting us, right? So
well, we're coming up on our hour mark. I can't even believe it. This is gone
yeah,
by so quickly. Yeah. But I don't know. I like to sometimes end our episodes with, I mean, you're in such a niche market, which is really, really cool. If someone was to be interested in pursuing, perhaps if they're interested in malt, if they're maybe interested in one day creating their own malt enterprise,
Malt house.
Malt monopoly.
Yeah, I'm like, I like there. Malt house. Yeah, thank you. If they were interested in that, could you say maybe one or two things that really kind of have been a little bit of a curveball? Could be good, could be bad, about opening shop since last summer. Has there been any, could be speed bumps,
I think
could be strange things that you weren't aware that was part of the industry?
I think like the biggest thing is like, it's not there's the North American Craft Maltsters Guild, but there's not a lot of similarities between everyone's malt houses. So to get an idea of what if you're going to open a brewery, you're going to go and you're going to call a manufacturer and you're going to say, hey, I've done my business plan for this size brewery. What do you have? Here's the money you need. Go talk to your tap room supplies, like beer lines and taps people. They'll give you a quote. The difference is like malting on the East Coast of the States is totally different than malting in Washington State or malting in Alberta. So it's very, finding the answers you want is like sometimes looking for a needle in a haystack. So it's been a lot of like, we're going to tell this person how to build this equipment and we're going to hopefully get equipment that works. And so that's, I think, really was like quite eye-opening. And because malting is such a small industry, it's kind of a little bit more tight-lipped than I would say the brewing industry is. Whereas you can go sit at a brewery, have a pint, and there's a good chance you'll run into their brewer, their owner, and they'll probably sit down and tell you like, here's the like Cole's notes on starting a brewery. Most of them might say don't do it. But in the malting industry, in the malting industry, like for instance, like I said, we literally sit in between fields and fields of barley. If you're in Tennessee and you're going to open a malt house, you're going to be maybe growing the first barley that's been grown in your county in that county for decades. And so it's a totally different venture. You can't even, it's like comparing apples to burgers. It's like not even the same like genre of food. So I think that's been one of the biggest learning curves is like, you're very much on your own in the malting industry of, it's not like we can compare our business plan or our equipment even to like our fellow craft maltsters down the road. They're very different between the two of them. So what works on their system isn't going to work on ours, and So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a whole different beast.
Yeah.
But a beast that's worthwhile for sure. Very profound
Yeah.
conversation with Alex and Aaron Hogarth from Hogarth Malt in Alberta. Thank you so much, Alex and Aaron. We look forward to chatting again next time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having us.
guys.
Thanks for joining us.
So much. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.